NHL training camps have begun, and we still have 5 unsigned restricted free agents heading into the year. These range from some decent players to core parts of NHL teams that have yet to sign. So I want to go through each of these free agents, their contract situations, and how big of a blow it might be to their seasons to not have their contracts signed yet. So make sure you guys watch till the end for all that, and hit that subscribe button if you're new for all the hockey content all throughout the season. A quick reminder before we start today that I have restarted the member program here on the channel. If you want to give just a couple bucks a month, you get exclusive videos every single week, plus custom emoji, a custom role in the Discord server, and a lot more. I'm going to be putting a ton of effort into the exclusive content here going forward, so if you guys want to join, you can hit the join button or click the link in the description down below. But getting into the RFAs that have still yet to sign, we have this great recap post by Puckpedia saying, as we near the start of training camps, there are 6 unsigned RFAs remaining who have played NHL games last season. In order of points and games played on the Puckpedia player dashboard, we got Mason McTavish, Luke Hughes, Luca Evangelista, Alex Holtz, Rasmus Kupari, and Wyatt Kaiser. Of course, right after I ended recording, Wyatt Kaiser ended up signing his extension with the Chicago Blackhawks, so now we are down to 5 restricted free agents left. Now, getting into these players and their contract situations, I first wanted to talk about Rasmus Kupari because I don't really know why he's included on the tweet or in the graphic or anything like that, because he signed in Switzerland for this next year. He's actually already played a game, getting 0 points and a -3. Ouch. On pace for minus 147. I guess that's a good thing he's not in the NHL. But yeah, I don't know why he's a part of this conversation or the group of RFAs, because Kupari isn't even eligible to be in the NHL this year. He signed over in Switzerland, which is a shame because I think he's always had decent potential as a okay defensive fourth-line center, but he probably wasn't going to get much of a contract anyways, and he ends up going overseas. And once Adam Lowry is fully healthy, they'll have him, Taves, and Vladislav Nemestikov. So in terms of the center situation, there really wasn't much room for him going forward. So I think for him, he made the right decision there. But now let's get into the 5 other RFAs that will actually be playing, hopefully, in North America this next year. We go on to Alexander Holtz, who is probably the least interesting among them. He's somebody that will probably be an AHLer this next year. So it's interesting to see him still unsigned. We'll see if he actually does end up going overseas. But I'm not really surprised that Vegas doesn't have the biggest appetite in the world to re-sign him because, what is there to re-sign? Holtz is one of the bigger busts of the 2020 draft so far. In terms of the goal scoring, he had some moments here and there, and I thought for New Jersey in 2024, there were some good goal scoring moments, but it's really just moments. It's weird stretches from him that might be good, might not be, and the inconsistency was just too much to handle. He only played 53 games this last year, got 12 points. For a purely offensive forward, it's just not good enough. Which is a shame because at 23 years old, I guess there's still time for him to be able to turn that page, but time is certainly ticking. I would say for Vegas, though, in terms of the priorities, Holtz has pretty obviously been last place, and I don't necessarily disagree with that. In terms of the latest news surrounding him, there's really not been any conversations that I've even heard. He was such an irrelevant player that he hasn't really even been brought up recently, so I can't even give you guys much of an update. He turned down his qualifying offer, and Vegas right now is $7 million in the hole cap space-wise, so I don't even know if there's an opportunity for Alex Holtz to even fit on the roster right now, cap situationally. So I think at some point his RFA rights just have to be dealt, or he ends up signing like Kupari overseas. That's kind of the most likely scenario, I would say, unless Vegas is able to find a suitor. But again, who right now has Alexander Holtz on their mind? Not really anybody. Okay, this segment has probably felt very mean. I'm not trying to be, but at the end of the day, it just is what it is. Moving on to another Central Division player here that hasn't signed yet, and that is Luca Evangelista of the Nashville Predators. Now, this is a situation where I believe the player has a lot more momentum on his side. Even though he wasn't quite up to the level I wanted after a pretty spectacular rookie season, getting 39 points, 16 goals, it wasn't quite at that level, I would say, in terms of the overall impact, but still put up 32 points in 68 games, which for Nashville last year, I think is still pretty impressive. He's a player, though, that I think is kind of on the precipice of breaking out, but of course, with him not signed, especially heading into training camps, that makes it a bit harder for him to have a stake on that forward group and really have a good year. So even though I think the leverage is quite a bit on Evangelista's side, I would say, he's another one, though, that I think would benefit from signing sooner than later. Now, keeping on with this Sportsnet article, giving us some insight on the Evangelista situation, a lot of this seems to be due to term and the differences from both sides involved. In Nashville's case, Trotz actually wants to go longer term, and that's a pretty interesting part of things, saying that the sides are in negotiations, but the true pressure point will be training camp, and then, as the Trotz quote gets laid out, we're just trying to find a term that fits. I would like to go longer. The agents are hesitant to go longer longer on term, which does make sense because especially if you're signing long term, even in Evangelista's case, you're not going to get a pretty big AAV by any means. But I think at some point Nashville might have to bend and make a bridge contract here, though. I wouldn't say that Evangelista is one of those players that I think is going to be a transformative top piece on your team. I think he's just going to be a solid middle sixer, so I don't think there's much of an issue for Nashville not being able to sign him long term, but we'll see how much of a stress point that becomes. And as Alex Doherty says, who covers the Preds and a beat reporter role, he says Evangelista, though he does play wing versus Zary at center, should get something similar, maybe a bit more, in response to Connor Zary's contract with the Flames, where he got 3 years at $3.8 million. And I would agree that it would probably be similar range. I think he'd probably get just less just because of the lack of pure offense there, where Zary's had some pretty interesting stretches, but I think it'll probably end up settling around 3-4 years, around $4 million, if I had to guess. If I'm Nashville, though, I would probably quicker bend to Evangelista than the other way around, just because they have so limited amount of options on that forward group, especially when you get outside of that top line. I think for the Preds to have really any chance whatsoever, they need Evangelista to not just be signed, but have a career foundational season. And again, the further you get from a contract, the longer it stays unsigned, the less of a likelihood there is for that actually to happen. He's just such a Swiss Army knife player, but I do want to see more consistency out of him, and I think that's kind of a problem when you get stepped into the lineup, especially once the NHL season starts. That's just not something I think Evangelista would want to have happen. I think that's not something that Nashville can afford to do right now, so this is, honestly, out of all the players we'll talk about today, one of the ones that I think kind of needs to get done for both parties to succeed. But now we go into the last two, which are easily the biggest, most major ones here. And let's start out with Mason McTavish of the Anaheim Ducks. This one really surprises me because it seems like Anaheim, this is the exact type of player they would love, that they would give so much money to have on the roster long-term in any capacity whatsoever. But obviously, Anaheim's been very stingy when it comes to the negotiations. And that's kind of been a theme when it comes to a lot of their RFA situations here. It's not really a new situation for them. But this is another one that I don't really think the team themselves can allow to go on for much longer. McTavish, in a lot of ways, is the heartbeat of that Ducks offense. In a lot of ways, is the heartbeat of that physicality and the intensity that they bring. He's a great example of that. And just at 22 years old, has already been able to prove himself quite well. This last season, getting 52 points, 22 goals in 76 games. He's just somebody I think the Ducks can't afford to not have on the roster. Even though they have a decent core around him, I think McTavish is one of the bigger parts of it. It's not the end of the world if he doesn't end up signing immediately. You have Leo Carlson as a decent first-line center. Hopefully he'll take a step. Ryan Strome has played second-line center before, even though it's not ideal. But I think the center situation goes from a clear strength to a bit of a mismatch if McTavish isn't there. This seems to be a pretty similar situation, though, to the Evangelista one, where the term difference between the both sides is really the biggest thing hurting it. As Luke Fox gets into, the McTavish hasn't earned arb rights hurts. That he has improved defensively while remaining an offensive threat, and reaching a 52-point mark helps. So how are talks going? Nothing yet. I'm sure it'll kind of happen as the summer goes on. Obviously, I love it here, and hopefully I can stay here, McTavish said in mid-April. They believe in me, no numbers, but I think that's more between my agent, me, and Pat. Verbeek described McTavish as a very important player to the organization on April 19th and said he has already spoken to the player's agent. By mid-June, however, no numbers have been exchanged. Recent contracts for young forwards like JJ Peterka in Utah, Nyes in Toronto, and Marco Rossi in Minnesota serve as comparables here. Another comparable for McTavish's next contract could be Quinton Byfield's recent 5-year extension in Los Angeles, which carries a $6.25 million AAV. Despite trade interest from competitors, we see Vancouver, Montreal, the belief is that Verbeek wants to lock up McTavish beyond a bridge deal. The moment you lose a center, you need to go find one. And that seems to be, again, the biggest difference between the two parties here. Even though there's been so much trade speculation and offer sheet speculation, I just don't see that happening unless we get further into the NHL season, which could restart things just a little bit. Now, this is a situation that I can understand from the team's perspective, not wanting to go over a bridge a lot more than Evangelista. McTavish has a ton of potential and I think has a lot of room to grow his value and AAV marks over the next few years. So this is somebody that if you could get a long-term contract done, you'd obviously want to. The big thing is that Anaheim consistently has said that they do not want to trade McTavish, they do not want to get rid of him, so it's not something that seems to be changing anytime soon. But again, once we get into the NHL training camps, once we get into the NHL season, that's when things start to change a little bit for teams and players, and that always creates a bit of a stress point. So we'll see in McTavish's case how much he and the team is willing to bend. My guess is it'll come somewhat in the middle. I think we're going to see a 5-year contract for McTavish, putting him right around that UFA range. We'll see once it does actually hit, but that would be my prediction as of now. I think it's going to come kind of in the middle, where Anaheim maybe doesn't get the 8-year contract, but McTavish doesn't quite get 3 years, or that shorter term that he'd want. At least that's what I think these two sides should be coming into agreement here, because I think both of them need each other to succeed. I think in McTavish's case, the Anaheim system, what they've been able to build up is exactly what his game is for. It's bred through that type of physicality and intensity, and I think it's exactly what's perfect for him. But for Anaheim, like we talked about, even though the center situation could be fine, it's not exactly in a good spot. And obviously with the coaching change and everything, with all the expectations heading into the year, this is a season that Anaheim really needs to win. They really need to improve. They really need to show what they're capable of with this core and what they've been able to build. And this is really one of the years where they really need to start putting up some big numbers. I mean, they just traded Trevor Zegras, who was before a pretty big part of that rebuild. Now it's really a time to see what they're capable of. And not having a McTavish there would just be a brutal blow. As I explained in my center video, I think Mason McTavish is the best center on the Ducks right now, even though I do think Leo Carlsson will likely surpass him after this next season. But that's a quality centerman. That's at least a very solid number 2C that is going to be especially a good playoff performer if they were to make it. And that's not somebody that the Ducks can afford to lose. Now, we did get a bit of an update here from Pierre LeBrun on the situation, saying that this has the vibes of two entrenched positions. They're not in agreement on term nor AAV. And that's not really surprising considering what we've heard around this situation, but it just shows how weird this is going to be and how much of a battle this will become. But now we go on to the most impactful RFA that has yet to be signed, and that is, in my opinion, Luke Hughes of the New Jersey Devils. Another one that seems to be at a complete stalemate right now and not really getting much progression, which is really disheartening because I think New Jersey needs this player, especially with Kovacevic already injured. That defense needs something. They need some consistency, and Luke Hughes potentially going into the season unsigned would certainly not be a good step in that direction. But at 22 years old, this is somebody that took, I think, a pretty big step this last year. Even though the point production wasn't as big, he missed some games, still got 44 points in 71 games, but I thought defensively looked way sharper, way more agile, and that was what was needed because the skating level has always been great. The offense, when he does have the puck on his stick, has always been superb. It's just about rounding out that game and rounding out the edges just a little bit. I don't think anybody is expecting Luke Hughes to be a masterful defensive defenseman or anything, but just get to a decent level so that the offense can shine. And I think that's what we started to see a lot more of in 2025. So it's a real shame that it seems a lot more likely he won't even start the year with New Jersey. But it's a lot more complicated than just wanting to sign Luke Hughes because New Jersey is in a pretty tight cap situation. But as Luke Fox writes, bridging the young defenseman at, say, $5.5 million per season could save money now, but set the Devils up for a monster bill when Hughes approaches UFA status and the cap has gone through the roof. The smart money says buy big now, and the vibes were positive in July. I talked to his agent on July 1st. We said, let's enjoy the holiday weekend and we'll start talking after. Tom Fitzgerald told reporters on July 2nd. He's excited. He wants to be a Devil long-term, just like his brother, and we're excited about that. But then as Luke Fox writes, Jersey only has roughly $7 million in cap space remaining, which is why veteran names like Andre Palat and Hamilton have surfaced in trade speculation. Teams are permitted to go 10% over the cap in the offseason. Luke prefers to sign a 5-year contract, according to Ryan Nowitzki. That would take him directly to unrestricted free agency and presumably a second big payday at age 26. And this is what's interesting. Such a term would mean Jack and Luke hitting the open market together in the summer of 2030. Why stop there? Quinn should extend that summer for 3 more seasons in Vancouver, and all 3 brothers could be a package deal. But that's what makes this one especially difficult, is that with Luke Hughes, you can't sign him to that long-term contract you probably want to sign him to, maybe even short-term, without making another move. Right now, according to Puckpedia as well, the Devils have only $6.13 million of remaining cap space. So in a lot of ways, in a lot of scenarios, signing Luke Hughes means you have to trade somebody else. And I think the Devils are looking in a spot where they're trying to trade people, they're trying to make moves happen, but because of how barren this offseason has been, it's been way more difficult to do so. That's what I think is holding up this entire situation, is the Devils cap debacle and how they're going to actually process that over the next month. Because as of right now, they're not going to likely sign Luke Hughes unless it's for like a 1-year contract under the cap they have right now. So they have to get creative, they have to get a little bit interesting, and we'll see what they're made of here in the next couple of weeks, because it's put up or shut up time, especially for New Jersey. They need a player like Luke Hughes to take another step and to really look good doing so, but he'd have to sign a pretty team-friendly contract to be under the cap, and that's just not going to happen. Unlike Nashville, Anaheim, Chicago, the other teams we mentioned today, it's just not simple for New Jersey. They can't simply just sign Luke Hughes. They have to find a different solution, and they have to do something before or after they sign Hughes, no matter what. So this will be a situation that I really am fascinated by. But I will say, if there's one RFA remaining in November, late, potentially early December, it's probably going to be Luke Hughes. If there's anybody that holds out, I think it's Luke most likely. Now, we did get an update also on the Luke Hughes situation from Elliot Freeman saying the two sides are fixated on a long-term deal. So term, at least in this case, doesn't seem to be much of a problem. So in some ways, maybe it's closer to happening than a Mason McTavish, who knows? But David Pagnotta writes that while there seems to be more optimism surrounding Hughes and the New Jersey Devils, both sides appear to be focused on an 8-year extension and are working around the dollars. The same cannot be said for McTavish and the Anaheim Ducks. So in some ways, it does seem like Luke is a bit closer, but again, they still have a massive problem actually fitting a Hughes contract under the cap, especially if it is a long-term contract. It's easier said than done for New Jersey, and this is obviously why it's taken so long to go down. But both Hughes and McTavish are going to be major stories heading in this NHL season. And honestly, with how they're both progressing, I don't see either of them being ready for the NHL year. We'll see if that goes further in, but right now it's not looking too great. But those are my thoughts on the RFAs that still have yet to sign heading into NHL training camps and the NHL season. Some of these will be very fascinating to keep an eye on, so we'll of course be updating on this channel as we go through things. But if you guys enjoyed, make sure you hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, and the notification bell. Comment down below your thoughts on all these guys and what you see them signing for, when do you see them signing, who do you see holding out potentially, and of course, should have all the hockey fans you guys know online, click on this card for all of my hockey trade content right in one playlist. And a big, massive thank you to the channel members. Their names will all be on the screen. Thank you guys so much for supporting the channel, and I will see you guys in the next one. Make sure you have a fantastic hockey day, and goodbye.